I'm live, I think.
Yeah, I got me little head there.
Is your little head, mind?
Yeah,
Is anyone? There's zero people watching.
I don't know.
Well, you're
Oh
watching,
yeah, no, it's
but
zero.
you're there. You're you're not actually watching on the internet. Eh.
It's okay.
There's two people watching.
Hooray!
Hey, thank you, those two people.
Yeah, they probably stumbled on it. You can't hear me because you got that on your head.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's just me, really. Liz is in the background. Hey, green tea. I hope you're having a good weekend. Ah. Oh, blimey.
That's
Yes.
what you're like.
Woody Black, welcome. I'm a bit tired and a bit coldy, and my lovely Liz is here,
Hello.
but she's in the background.
I'm in the background.
She's not participating,
Guinness.
although she's done brilliant uh, putting pictures on the thing for our talk.
Pictures on the thing.
Pictures on the thing. So I apologise in an up front for I'm going to be rambling a little bit, and it is going to be a bit like someone's showing their holiday photos on a slideshow.
Some shit. You can't hear me.
Liz just said some of them are shit because she's good about advertising. Hello, Mab.
Hey, Mum.
Hey, Mab.
I'm waving.
Green tea. I'm glad you're excited. I hope I won't dull your enthusiasm. Yeah, blooming rude, don't you, Liz? Oh, yeah. So I will just get started in a moment, but I hope uh, everyone is doing well. And yeah, so it was an amazing trip to the Orkneys. Um, so I'm just going to run through a few bits and pieces as I go along. Um,
Hopefully
so
you won't be able to hear the noise, the video.
okay, all right. Well, I've got some video clips, but we've taken the noise out.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, so I'm just going to talk over them. But just the first clip, it's just really from a board that people put up. So this was on my way up to the Orkneys. So I did a bit of a long planes, trains, and automobiles. I flew up from Bristol to Edinburgh, and then train from Edinburgh to Aberdeen, and then ferry about 7 hours ferry from Aberdeen to Kirkwall in the Orkneys. This was when I was in Aberdeen waiting for the ferry, and there was just like a plaque there about the witchcraft sort of panic, as they described it, um, in the was it 1597. So it was only short lived, but apparently, like a huge number of women were cruelly tortured and executed. I know it went on. Obviously, it went on south of the border as well. I think it was preempted by the same James, who, when he became the first king of Scotland and England combined, he seemed to have a bit of an obsession with witchcraft. So he brought one of these witchcraft laws, um, and huge numbers of women were persecuted. Probably many of them weren't even practicing witchcraft, even the benevolent kind that we know, to sort of hedge witches and things like that. Um, Many were just probably women who are sort of outsiders and maybe just used to boil up herbs and know sort of old remedies for things, and they were just people could just accuse someone of witchcraft, and then they ended up getting horrible tortures and the rest of it, and it was a kind of thing. It didn't really matter if they were found guilty or not. They were going to suffer horrible tortures and probably come to a not horrible end. Um, so this was just sort of showing some of the things that happened. Um, um, oh, green tea. You say never. seen the construction older than 300 years. But as you say, other than Indian mounds, I mean, there is a load of fascinating stuff in North America. There's more and more evidence, I think, of that there was a Neolithic past there. A lot of things that they said, oh yeah, the Indians did these, and the Indians themselves are going like, it's in their legends that they were already there prior to their civilization. This last image down here, I didn't actually realise that she was from the Aberdeen area, but Helen Duncan was the last woman that was convicted under the Witchcraft Acts in Britain. I think that.
He's done his talk again, so go to Neil's show because he's done his talk again.
What on
Helen Duncan.
On the Paranormal Peep Show?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was just saying. I was going to say anyway that our good friend Ben Emlyn Jones, for Panwo TV, has done talks on Helen Duncan, that woman there in the bottom right hand corner. And apparently Liz was saying that he's done his talk again just recently on Neil Peel's Paranormal Peep Show, which we were on some weeks or months ago. So definitely check that out. It's a fascinating talk if you haven't heard it. And she was a fascinating woman who was a psychic, and this was during the war years. Was it the Second World War? Yeah, and she actually apparently was visited, if you like, or had was able to channel, I suppose you'd say, the spirit of, I think, a dead serviceman, and was relaying information about things that had happened in attacks during the war. Basically, I think she was tried under these witchcraft laws, and it was about her falsely claiming to procure spirits, and it was saying that it was all a stage show sort of thing. But as the theme of Ben's talk, I think he makes a good case that this was actually brought by the authorities because they actually, on the contrary to them thinking it was a fraud, they actually thought that she did have genuine powers, and they were worried that that somehow she would get information from the other side which could reveal things about the war effort and that sort of thing. Sorry, coughing. I didn't want to cough in everyone's ear. Okay, yeah, but I didn't want to cough in everyone's ear on the internet. That would be rather unpleasant. But yeah, so it's a fascinating story. You know, she was going to say, reminds me of how folks in the last few years were persecuted for natural cures, which worked and didn't go along with the standard. Well, there has been a huge amount of yeah, well, yes, yeah, lots of, as Liz was saying, most dangerous thing in the world to be a homeopath. I mean, so many natural healers suddenly dropped dead or had accidents. It was quite a coincidence, or a series of many coincidences, terrible coincidences. And then, funnily enough, there's then been all these different laws in different countries about restricting natural remedies, as Green Tea mentioned, and it's even got to the extent where it's being outlawed in different places about growing your own food and that sort of thing. So, as we know, it's all part of the war against, well, being human, being natural, the traditional methods of doing things, and things that are actually be good for people and help people, because as they know, they just want to shove people along the route of the big pharma. And it's quite funny, like even with Liz's recent trips to the doctors, and they've been using a gel which is made from seaweed. So, they use all these natural remedies and sort of, but we've got this amazing new product, and yeah, they've done something with the natural product, whether for good or bad, to to add things to it. But
Do leeches as well on people's wounds.
they do leeches on people's wounds.
There's the Manuka honey as well.
Manuka honey. So Liz isn't involved, everybody, but she's also
Involved.
she's the spirit. I'm like channeling Liz. I am like being a medium in this sort of. I'm not going to repeat that on camera. Christ. Right. Liz is drinking the Guinness. I'm being professional until I finish my talk, and then I might have a little Guinness. It might be gone by then, yeah. So yeah, well, I just wanted to do that as an aside because it just sort of struck me when I saw that that Aberdeen apparently has got a big connection. Well, I say with the paranormal, certainly there was this sort of panic around witchcraft, which they were suggesting that there was loads of it around, but how much of that was just them paranoia of the day. But it also is a little example as well about the things that Liz is talking about on the reading of Gods of Eden, and also I've talked about on previous talks this sort of different layers of when it's different forms of empire or empires ruling people, when they take a particular spiritual message, for want of a better word, or secret information, or and it becomes codified into a way of controlling people. And with this one, you've got, well, supposedly Christianity, but inflicting torture and killing people, is hardly what would really be the message of any true religion, or should be. But then it was being used to clamp down on, you could say, on an old belief system, an old, whether you want to call it a religion, but certainly practices of belief and folklore around witchcraft or around pagan rituals and that sort of thing. But it's just using just making an excuse for power and control, really. But anyway, let's just move on. So that was just a little aside on my way up. So we've not made the Orkneys yet. We're just in Aberdeen. But this is the just a little video I was doing from the top of the ferry of Aberdeen Harbour, as it is now, obviously with the ferry ship and modern buildings and container ships, that sort of thing. There was a bit of an old castle-y type building in the background there, with a sort of an acknowledgement of the past there. But it did remind me when I was there around the harbour and getting on the ferry in Aberdeen, that was the site of I do believe I've not, yeah, apologies, I didn't, yeah. Yeah, okay, apologies, I meant to include a drawing here, but basically it reminded me of a character that I mentioned in my Lost Child book, known as Indian Peter, or Peter Williamson, and he was abducted when he was a child from Aberdeen, and I think he was abducted from the quay at Aberdeen. So obviously centuries ago, but it would have been in this vicinity, really, of where I'm filming now. So I mean, it's this history of, I mentioned before about child migration, which went on into the 20th century, where it became something which was done semi-officially by these often church organizations, charities that would take kids to the colonies, different places of empire, like Australia, Canada. But it sort of had the earliest beginnings back right in the very start of early days of empire. 1618, 100 child migrants were sent to the by the City of London. So right at the beginning, it was all bound up with the City of London, the financial institution, and then we know that as a centre right up to today of the money and power that lies behind so much of what we know is wrong with our world, and what's the people in power that shouldn't be. This was at the request of the Virginia Company to provide labour for the colony in America. And such organised parties in the period up to the 19th century were only sporadic, but there was alongside this the widespread abduction of poor children, many of whom had families, from Britain, and they were shipped to the emerging colonies. They were abducted from streets and the countryside. One contemporary account stated that in the dead of night, children were taken by force from the beds where they slept, by ruffians who hunted their prey as beasts of the chase. That was from the Book of Bonaccord. And this practice was known as spiriting. And I commented before, it's always struck me that this, well, horrible, hideous practice of just literally stealing children away from little kids from their families and taking them off to the other side of the world to be basically slaves. They were often, I think they were called indentured labourers. So it was sort of like almost like a serfdom thing where they were sold. So they were basically like slaves, but a little bit better than slaves in that they were sort of sold to a landowner, but it was usually, I think, for a number of years. So as they maybe reached 18 or something like that, after a certain number of years of probably very hard work on the plantations for a certain landowner, they would then get their freedom. But still, well, still they were taken away from their families by force, and they didn't have any choice in the matter, and they were taken away miles away. And then, of course, I'm sure many of them probably had very cruel conditions in wherever they were sold to. Apparently, this Peter Williamson, he said that the person who bought him had themselves been an indentured child labourer who had then got their freedom, and they were then became a landowner. So this person, although they obviously didn't dislike the practice enough not to buy another child labourer for themselves, but they treated, he said, Peter Williamson said he was treated well. And then when this owner died, he left in his will a little bit of money to Peter Williamson, and he had his freedom. He had quite an amazing story. He wrote this autobiography later on, and it's been claimed that a lot of it was embellished, but he said he was abducted by Native Americans, and he described, seeing them scalping people and murdering people and nasty practices. A lot of that has been, historians since have Neil Pill's joined in. If you visit my show in Orkney, you see where the Vikings, sheltering from a 3-day storm, left their rude marks in the Neolithic chamber. Thank you, Neil. Yes, you've. That's a spoiler alert, but I'm quite happy. Quite happy, Neil, for you to jump in and yeah, that's it was a great place to visit. I did actually get in there. Yeah, we've got a video later yeah, I haven't. You're not allowed to actually film inside the chamber, so I haven't got any film of that. But yeah, it was a great place, Neil. So you used to live in the Orkneys, didn't you? So okay, so um, so yeah, this practice was known as spiriting. So it always struck me that they used this term, like a paranormal, spiritual term for something so horrible, and it sort of linked him in my book because, like I've said before, my book was not written when I was aware of a lot of the what we'd say conspiracy land stuff, but I still felt that the lost child figure and how it was used in books and films and that sort of thing, it was prevalent in our culture, and I thought that there was something underlying it, um, but also there was maybe a spiritual element to it, for want of a better word, or it was somehow connecting to some nothingness or something beyond our material world that somehow everything was based on. And I'm wondering if now, again, can't say too much on YouTube, but things that are spoken about happening with the people in power and things horribly that they may do with kids, and it may, in their sick way, it be in a similar line to what I was thinking in my book with how they're doing these things to try and tap into something underlying our reality. Um, but yeah, this Peter Williamson, he wrote in the way of the 18th century. They had these fantastically long titles. So his book was called French and Indian Cruelty, exemplified in the life and various vicissitudes of fortune of Peter Williamson, who was carried off from Aberdeen in his infancy and sold as a slave in Pennsylvania. That was written in 1757. I mean, some of their titles are actually longer than most books these days, but yeah, he is a really fascinating character. I mean, as I say, he probably did embellish certain things in his story, particularly about being in captivity with Native American tribes. But he eventually made his way back to England initially, um, on ship, obviously, landed in Plymouth, so obviously right down the south of England. I think pretty much penniless, and then basically he walked all the way. Well, he was walking basically the length of England to get back up to Scotland. Um, and he had with him, he did have with him this Native American headgear and clothing. Where he'd got it from, if he had, so maybe he had some contact with Native Americans. Um, and he sort of used to do little sort of shows of sort of, I guess, making some sort of noises of being a Native American, and then he used to get money as he went along on his travels, and he used to sort of, I guess, busk basically his way up. And I think when he got to York, he actually someone was taken up with his story, and I think that's when he actually sort of started publishing his book. That gave him some extra money, so he ended up back in Scotland, in Edinburgh. Um, he had this coffee shop where all these sort of lawyers were at the time, and he got in with these sort of lawyers, court officials, and that sort of thing, and they encouraged him to take out a prosecution against the merchants that were responsible for him being abducted, because again, it was all at the center of um, center of a trade in kids, basically, and he won the prosecution. Um, yeah, and it's quite a guy. Okay, I'm rambling off, and this is in despair over there. So
What's that got to do with mental illness?
it was an aside.
Boring aside.
It was a boring aside, everybody. So I'm apologising if I was a boring aside. Okay, so I made my way over. I got the ferry. Now this is the first place I visited. It's one of several chambered cairns. Now they basically seem like the same principle as long barrows around this area in England. Basically, burial mounds that you found, evidence of bones, their bodies within these cairns. But I think certainly they were more than just simply a place of burial. They were also somewhere, I would think, a lot of people speculated that it was also a place of ritual and that sort of thing, and of vital importance to the people of the megalithic age. I apologise for my dodgy camera work. I'm not the best of cameramen, as you will all realise, but this is all, as I'll show later, in a very close proximity. So they're some of the standing stones that you can see in the background over the other side of the lock. They was really good at it because I got on this. This was the first morning on. I think that was. Sorry, it was on the. Yeah, it was on my first morning in the Orkneys, and the bus was absolutely packed. I think quite often you get cruise ships stopping stopping at the Orkney Islands, and whenever the cruise ships come in, then it's massively full of people. But they mainly go to the most famous sites, which are well worth going to. But I sort of got off the bus. The first place I went to was this cairn, and there was no one else there. There was just a few people just coming away from it as I got there, so I had the place to myself, and I can actually get inside. And this is inside the same cairn, so you've got the basically like pretty much like standing stones marking off the different areas, if you like, within the cairn, and so then people will be buried, I think, in different sections. As I say, I think there was a lot more to it than that. There was also a ritual element involved. Obviously, that roof there has been added to later on to make it safe for people. And there's just one of the inside the little room there. But it was quite fantastic to actually be able to go into their places with no one else around. I think that's always a special thing when you go to any old sites. Obviously, the best known sites where there's loads of people, it's still great to go and see them, but you don't when it's a bit busy site, it doesn't have the same experience. If you can go to maybe a smaller site, even if it's less spectacular in the way it's put together or something like that, and not so notable in many ways, just the fact that you can experience it. I was just sort of sat inside there in the little side chamber, and you can just get an experience of it all on your own, really. I mean, I'm not, like I said, bore you with saying this, but I'm not someone that can actually feel these things intrinsically, like sort of energies and frequencies or whatever you want to call it. But still, just to feel that you were in this site, where people thousands of years ago. I mean, basically, these sites around this central area of the Orkney Islands, they're pretty much all around the 5,000 year old mark, about 3,000 plus BC. So it's quite awe-inspiring to think that yeah, it's just those connections. And I think That's an interesting point, Green Tea. I think there was some mention that some of these cairns did have stones erected first, and then they built the cairn sort of around and over the top of them. So I think that could all be the case. I know when I did the trip with Hugh Newman from Megalithomania to Stanton Drew Stone Circle and also to Stony Littleton Long Barrow, and Hugh was saying that the Long Barrows, talking about England now, predated the stone circles, so they were older. I'm not sure if, I think in these cases in the Orkneys they were around a similar time, but yeah, this particular, I mean, the concentration of sites around this particular area of the Orkney, obviously we're blessed around where I live here in the sort of Wiltshire, Somerset area for the close proximity of sites, but there's something particularly notable that drew them to that particular area of the Orkneys, and I think, well, I'd keep moving on to the next one. That's just another picture inside that Unston chambered cairn. So this is close by again. So this is the standing stones of Stennes. I mean, one of the famous stone circles. The Ring of Brodgar is just a bit further on, and I'll sort of show them a bit later. Now this sort of altar stone, apparently, unfortunately, that has happened in some places. There's been all sorts of vandalism and things being moved about. So at one point, that altar stone, someone had made it into like a dolmen shape, but that's not how it was originally found. Some people just put it like that, and then other people ripped it down. And there was all sorts of, there was some mad farmer guy around the sort of 1800s that actually blew up a couple of stones around here. I mean, it's shocking and depressing that so much violence went on to these incredible sites, incredible historic sites. It just defies belief, the ignorance of some people, really. That's just, I think, a central fire pit probably in the middle of the circle. As you can see, can't really fully see a circle at the moment because, as I say, not all the stones are there anymore. But I think where this sort of marker stones are by this so-called altar stone, that is facing in the direction of the Maeshal chambered cairn that Neil mentioned in the chat, which I'll go on to a moment. But yeah, it was there were a couple of synchronicities that were not synchronicities exactly, but references I mentioned in my symposium talk when they were a couple of different speakers referred to the Orkneys during their talks. One was just in as an aside, I think, was it Raiden Jennings, who's been someone involved in various well, he's been involved in Palestine a lot, with relief and helping people and teaching people there, and sort of great work there, but also been very involved with crop circles and all these sort of paranormal and alternative things. But he was just saying, as a young man, he was just hiking around Britain and ended up in the Orkneys, and he was just sort of walking around with his backpack, didn't really know what was what, didn't go deliberately to this place, but he just said he sort of ended up at a stone circle, and he realised afterwards that it was these standing stones of Stennes. So this was decades ago. I talked to someone on a boat actually on the ferry, an American guy who'd been over several times before because his wife was from the Orkney Islands originally, and he was saying back in the 80s, 90s, a lot of the sites, there was no formal presentation of them or anything like that, and you could just sort of turn up and they'd be in a farmer's field maybe and just ask the farmer if they could go in there and that sort of thing. I mean, there's still loads of stone circles and other places that are around that are like that. It's just a case of knowing where they are, but well, and getting to them and making the effort to go there. But Jennings said he just ended up sort of curling up with his sleeping bag and sleeping in the middle of the stones. But he was saying that the next morning he woke up and he'd had a bit of a download and a bit of a sort of spiritual awakening. So I think even despite the violence has been enacted there, and that the fact that it's now a big tourist site, as you'll see here. I mean, there's sort of people turning up all the time. Obviously, I was there in the peak time during the summer, so it fluctuated a bit, but in general, obviously there was a lot of tourists around. There I'm sure will be much quieter times you could go, when there wouldn't be as many tourists and that sort of thing. But you still got sort of little moments between a coach turning up. If you sort of didn't have a big time scale that you were hanging on to, then you could just wait around for a moment to sort of get a little bit of time to yourself. But yeah, I've got a feeling even though this particular place, there wasn't anything like you had to pay entry or anything like that. It's just there in the landscape. The stone circles are. But even then, I'm sure probably the ranger would come along if you wanted to lie with a sleeping bag in the middle of the circle. Someone would probably say you're not allowed to do that, I expect. But at least you can walk around. It's nothing like Stonehenge when you're prevented from even getting into the getting in and touching the stones most of the time. So this is the just a quick map of the Orkneys themselves, just to orient people. I did read that there was about 70 islands, the Orkney Islands. I mean, you look at the map there and there's not 70 there, so obviously the majority of them must be really, really like tiny rocks or something like that. But this is the basic grouping of the larger islands. But yeah, I just spent all my time on what is known as the mainland of the Orkney Islands. So it's just this area here. So basically those most famous sites, which is now a UNESCO World Heritage Area, is in this section here. So it's like a little isthmus is probably the wrong word, isn't it? But it's like a little land bridge that just basically divides up these two locks in the middle of the island. So you have where I went to that first cairn is just here on the bottom left of the lock, and I think it's just close to a point where there was like used to be I think the lock used to actually be open to the sea, and it's not anymore. I think that obviously the geography has changed. Yeah, and there was a connection of these stone sites were built along this sort of alleyway, and there's Mice Howe there, which Neil mentioned, and it goes up to this Neolithic settlement Skara Brae on the coast. But yeah, I thought shown it just in a bit more closer detail, these sites. So that's where I started that cairn when I was on my own, and then I walked all the way down here to the stones of Stenes. So we've got the Maeshowe chambered cairn over here. There's another Neolithic settlement there, the Nessa Brodgar, which I mentioned in a moment, and then the Great Stone Circle, the Ring of Brodgar. So there's also more cairns, but it felt to me that those two locks together, whether it was like two lungs or two chambers of the heart, two hemispheres of the brain, even, it just felt symbolically to me that was somehow part of the draw in the landscape to place these sites in the middle of it. It's like drawing from the energy of those two. It's almost like internal organs of the landscape, and that, I don't know, it just struck me seeing it on the map that way. So often things are in two as well, of course, which I sort of mentioned. On to mention now, often you get with the stones, they quite often things are paired up. This was, well, I saw this referred to as the Odin stone. This is just up from the standing stones of Stenes, just literally just 100 yards or so further up. Now, apparently, there was a second, or the main Odin stone, I suppose, around here to the right of the bridge. So again, you had this, so often when you have the sort of duality where there's the standing stones there, so often there's a duality of, as you saw Göbekli Tepe, you have like an entranceway type thing, sort of a portal, and you've got two standing stones either side of each other. Now, apparently, this so-called Odin stone, although obviously the Vikings, which I'll go on to later, were, many thousands of years later than these Neolithic settlements and megaliths. But the name of it, I suppose, is an example of how you get different cultures and mythologies overlaying on top of each other, but it's still basically a symbolic of something otherworldly, spiritual, if you want to call it that. But I mentioned about this mad bloody farmer who like blew up some of the stones at the stones of Stenes and managed to destroy part of it, because I think partly because he didn't want, he was pissed off with people like locals coming and having sort of ceremonies. I think part of the destruction was done in December, and there was something suggesting that some rituals were done there. So even then, I think that was in maybe the 19th century. Some kind of ritual, whether they're the same ones, probably not, but it still meant a lot to the local people. And as soon as like people realised what this guy was doing, he was, people furiously, stopped him. Thank God, but unfortunately not quickly enough. So this Odin stone here on the right, that's got a hole in it, that was original Odin stone, as I say, facing this other megalith, but the farmer managed to completely destroy this one. And so interesting that it had a hole in it, because again, going back to Göbekli Tepe, again, you often had holes in the stones, and they would often be aligned, so they would be directed to, for certain, a solstice, sunrise, sunset, equinoxes, that sort of thing. So light would go through a hole to direct a beam of light maybe towards another particular monument or something, you know, to denote something at a certain time of the year. So I would imagine it's quite likely that that hole in the stone was something of that nature. I think in more recent times it had been used by local people. It was to do with sort of like a marriage ceremony, or at least a betrothal. I think the couple used to stand at either side and actually sort of hold their hands within the hole. And it used to be, you know, mark that people were coming connected to each other for, you know, for all time to get married, which I suppose, you know, it comes to, you know, obviously now when we have, you know, wedding rings, again, it's, you know, it's that still that similar symbolism, of, you know, that your circle of eternity, if you like, and you're wedded with someone forever. So yeah, that practice has been something that had gone up into sort of the modern era, and I think locals were still doing it, or, you know, having these sort of rituals, up until the mad bloody farmer blew it up. Um, oh, my good lady wife is listening from in bed. Oh dear. Oh well, I thought she just despaired of me rambling on. But Liz had spent hours of me sending over images so she could put them on this sort of slideshow presentation. So I do appreciate that, Liz. So yeah, but interesting again that it was called the Odin Stone, because mention a bit more as Neil mentioned with my show, how there's this overlay slightly of the Orkney, of the Vikings with the megalithic Neolithic era. So anyway, this bit further up again on this same stretch of land, little tiny stretch of land. This is the Ring of Brodgar, and an amazing, huge stone circle. It's the third biggest in the British Isles, after Stanton Drew, which, of course, I did a talk about a while back on my tour there with Hugh Newman. This bit, it just struck me again. It's like the idea of, I think this is like an entrance way, and the stone that's in the background. I've got a closer up image of that a bit later, but it reminded me again. Well, I suppose this one does as well, in the foreground on the right. That reminded me a little bit of the Easter Island heads, and the stones still have this diagonal break along the top. Apparently, that is sort of the kind of stone it's made out of. That is a sort of natural way for it to crack or to break. But nevertheless, you know, there's quite likely a symbolism to it, but people don't know what that is. But yeah, something that's one in the background I'll go to in a moment. But it looked to me a little bit anthropomorphic, like it was more like a head than some of the others. But yeah, so I mean, there was a little bit of restriction in that they said they were protecting the pathway, so you couldn't go into the inner pathway, which is actually right by the stones themselves. So you just basically had to walk around the outside. But I didn't mind that. It's still very close to the circle. So I didn't feel deprived that I couldn't go and actually get to touch those stones, because certainly the other ones in the standing stones of Siness you can get right up to. Yeah, once again, I apologize. My camera work doesn't do the immensity of the stone circle justice, because it is a breathtaking sight. I'm just sort of zooming in again there. I think that's probably just a fallen stone, but also it could be something was marked there as almost looks like an altar stone in some ways. But yeah, you see that crack, the diagonal across the top. That's pretty common with most of the stones. Now this this maybe looks a bit I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me with the old Neolithic Britons. They like their the imagery looking a bit saucy. But I think I mean, even before just reading any information about the sites, those mountains and the way they dip there in the middle of the valley, it reminded me when I was talking about Andrew Collins' Cygnus Key, and he was referring to way back to Siberia when he was talking about the Denisovans and how they might have been an originally species in a way, maybe with sort of some sort of savantism, where they had this incredible knowledge of mathematics and astronomy and that sort of thing potentially. And I forget the name of it now. It's on the talk I did about Andrew Collins' book Zinski. But there's a particular mountain in Siberia where it's sort of two peaks, and there's a space between them, and they were saying it was sort of like an observatory where you could see the sort of the passing of the sun, the different equinoxes, solstices, celestial bodies going through this space between the two peaks. So these two peaks, and I think Andrew was suggesting that these two peaks could then be a model why when these peoples then made the way down into what's now Turkey and started the sites like Göbekli Tepe, that's why maybe you've got all these twin towers opposite facing each other, often around, either side of a portal stone, a hole in a stone, which could again either could be something you could see through to, again, a particular celestial alignment, or just the idea of it being a portal through to the afterlife, another world. And again, I thought that these peaks here, apparently, that I found out afterwards, that this is actually on the adjacent island, the island of Hoy. People might have heard the phrase or the place, the Old Man of Hoy, which is like a rock stack sort of by the cliffs on this island of Hoy, just adjacent to this mainland of Orkney. I didn't go over there. Again, I sort of, because I only had about 4 days to look around, and there's so much to see on the mainland anyway. I didn't even get to do absolutely everything on the mainland, so I just stayed there. But I was tempted to just take the ferry across to Hoy. There is a particularly notable site there called the Dwarfy Stain, like a huge chamber that's just carved out of one enormous slab of rock. But yeah, I didn't make it. Another time. But again, there's a winter solstice. I believe it's sunset that drops down. So this is not my image, but this is, I think someone took this on that winter solstice sunset, and see it just you can see where maybe it's just started to drop there between the mountains, but it's literally in a line there to, that's where the ring of Brodgar is, and there's another like cairn on the edge, or basically between the ring of Brodgar and these mountains in Hoy. So again, I'm sure that's no coincidence with all the alignments. But yeah, So yeah, sorry. There's again those mountains of Hoy, and that's this another cairn, and that's I've got my back to the Ring of Brodgar there. There's some guy who was just up there annoyingly. I suppose it gives a bit of scale, but this guy's standing at the top of this cairn taking some photographs. But I guess it's all part of, like so many of these sites, it's inscribing the landscape and connecting it with the sky, the heavens, afterlife. Obviously, these cairns will be burials, chambers, and again, you know, a lot of people speculate people would go in there maybe for a long period of time to sort of commune with the dead, and it would be obviously in darkness, and it would be meditating, maybe receiving spirits, who knows, and getting an experience of the afterlife, perhaps an initiation into some sort of shamanism or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it's just the Ring of Brodgar again. It's a beautiful site, awesome. Certainly urge anyone that hasn't seen it to pay a trip out there. Just awesome. That's the cairn. Looking back to the Ring of Brodgar, but so as I say, I think it's the biggest in Scotland, and the third biggest in the British Isles, after Stanton Drew, which is the second biggest, just down the road from here, and also just down the road from here, Avebury is the biggest in the British Isles. But see that chap there, which I'm zooming in on. See, he made me think that a little bit like a head and hair, or even one of those monk's caps that they have for people. I do apologise for the. Oh dear, look at that! It's gone all over the place. My camera work. But it did make me think that it was maybe chosen, that stone. Obviously, it wouldn't have been exactly the same shape thousands of years ago, and there would have been erosion. So it's possible that it didn't always look that shape, but that certainly gave the impression to me that it was something that was chosen as looking a bit anthropomorphic. Yeah, yeah, I agree, Green Tea. It does look like a man, or a monk even. Yeah. And you obviously we have the some of those ancient orders, secret societies, and they have that sort of like that sort of hat that sort of rises up, and that is similar now to the sort of the Roman Catholic, like the Pope wears that sort of peaked sort of cone head. But yeah, the weather here, as you probably see in the background, it was a bit. The Sunday was lovely. Monday, it chucked it down. It was there. You see the wind on the on the side there. It was howling a gale. And fish hat. Thank you very much, Liz, from upstairs. It was absolutely howling a gale, and they actually closed down. I was hoping to go to this Nesod Brodgar on this Monday. The first day it was open after I arrived, but the ranger said that they'd never known them to actually close it before. But they said they weren't going to do tours because just the wind and rain were that bad. So basically, the Monday was a bit of a washout. I still went back to the ring. I was in the vicinity, so I went to the Ring of Brodgar, and it was still good to see it again. But I think I thought, like, the idea of getting a different experience of it. It was lovely to see it in the sunshine, don't get me wrong, but somehow windswept and with a bit of a storm, it had a bit of a Macbeth Wuthering Heights type feel to it, and I sort of thought, well, I'm in the islands north of Scotland, and just to get a bit of a taster of that sort of wild weather somehow sort of gets me in the feel of it as well. So I'm just playing this again just to sort of zoom in again a little bit, just to get a look at that head again. It definitely does seem to have a quality to it that didn't quite appear with any of the others. So this is the Nesta Brodgar. So this is this Neolithic site that was only, I think, pretty much discovered about 20 odd years ago. The usual sort of thing, the farmer ploughing in his field and coming up with some stones. And they've ended up, doing this dig, and it's been, uncovering some spectacular artifacts, and then they've now filled it all back up. It's now back to being a field again. That's one of the, or a picture of one of the many sites. I went to the museum, Orkney Museum, afterwards, and they got a few of these pieces in this very little museum. But again, you sort of very, very simple geometrical shapes on the markings on a lot of the these stones that they found in there. I guess it could go back to sort of sacred geometry ideas and these sort of things that are the basis of everything. It confuses the hell out of the archaeologists. No one's, well, I don't think any, well, probably, I'm sure some people have claimed what they think it might mean, but I mean, it looks like a building site. I suppose it's the opposite of a building site. It's a putting things together site, but there were lots of people there. They do these tours, and it was just walking around having a look at the dig, and the guy talking about what they'd found. I mean, you can see how close it was to the lock. I think at the time it was built, I think maybe the wasn't quite so close, but obviously still it was just this sort of land bridge, if you like, between the two locks. So again, we got the connection see so often of ancient sites with bodies of water, whether it's lakes, streams, by the sea itself, or particularly around here with underground water with aquifers. But the energy connection being by water sources, again, they seem to be in places that are connecting up the energies of the earth, water, and obviously connecting as well to the sky. So bringing all these elements together. Just showing a few sites. I mean, they were saying that they think this Nesta Brodgar it's sort of like a little village, but from what they've seen, they didn't find evidence so much of rubbish. It's interesting, like a lot of the archaeologists, some of the most interesting information they get is like the rubbish that was left around. They said this site was kept very clean, so that they're thinking that it's maybe just more of a ceremonial site. Obviously, it's right by the Ring of Brodgar, so it's in this incredible sacred area with the stone circles and the cairns as well. So the evidence of maybe rituals where they got bones, animal bones for feasting. So it would seem that maybe people went there regularly, but to enact rituals and maybe be there for notable periods in the calendar, to have a particular ritual, celebration, whatever it may be, but not to live there permanently week after week. So they would go in, have the celebration, go out again. And maybe partly because of that, they were saying that a lot of it was badly built in a way, in that it was quite common for them to sort of build new structures on the ruins of older ones. And the way they were built, I mean, you can okay, it was been under the ground for thousands of years, so it's probably not going to look its best, but it's you can see it's sort of it's wonky. Is, you know, you've got one bit pointing down that way, and another bit, you know, another wall which was obviously two walls of the same room at one point, and another bit's pointing upwards, and it's all wonky basically. So again, I suppose that might all add credence to the fact that they weren't building these things as permanent settlements where people needed to live every day of their lives for a long period of time. And it was a case maybe of just erecting these semi-temporary structures, or, you know, things that would obviously last for some period of time, but just really something to maybe more to mark a particular place, where they could have important rituals to mark, you know, whatever it may be, a major point in the calendar and those sort of things. Just a bit of a zoom in there on the wall there. But yeah, so I mean, this was my particular reason for going to the Orkneys on this particular week, because this was the very last week after doing all these excavations each summer for a number of years. They said, "Oh, we've got a load of artifacts, we've got a load of information, all these sort of things, and we'll be studying that, carrying on studying that for years and years. But we need to preserve the site. The kind of rock that it is deteriorates." I'll come back to that in a minute. Deteriorates in the conditions, in the weather, and if we keep it exposed, then it's green tea. You said, did they find anything they were able to date? So again, they're looking. It's around the 3000 plus mark BC, so 5000 plus years from now. That sort of age, similar to the time of the stone circles. So yeah, they've certainly been able to get an age on it. But you know, there's still a lot of question marks about so much that went on there. But yeah, it's I guess now it's I'll probably look. There's probably some pictures online. They'll be a bit sad to see, because they've filled it all now. It's gone back to being a field. They filled it all back in. They say that it can't be covered, you know, with some sort of structure to protect it. They say that there's so much that they didn't even expose, and that if you erected a structure, then you'd be sort of putting foundations, legs, posts into ground, and possibly damaging something else that's valuable underneath it. I don't know. It's a difficult one. I mean, I must admit, I was suspicious at first, I suppose, in my conspiracy theorist head, especially with this sort of news about Göbekli Tepe, you know, that Bright Insight was drawing attention to, about, oh, the World Economic Forum are connected to the owners of that site, and, you know, that's only had about 10% of it uncovered, and now they're saying, oh, they're not going to bother excavating the rest, and they're going to, again, a similar thing to they said Nesobaga, they're going to leave it for future generations. You know, when there's people who've got better technology, you know, maybe they could uncover things again and go into it again. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it's the same thing as Göbekli Tepe with the Nessa Bodgar, but I guess I always get suspicious again, that they uncovered something, or they thought there might be something there that they might find later on. So they're like, "Oh, let's stop it now. We don't want to go any further." I don't know. It just seems a shame. I know there's some people living around there, although it is a very thin strip of land. It was farmland around there. Well, as DJ, as you say, maybe they found something that questions the narrative. That is always in my mind. That's a possibility there. So I don't know. I'm keeping an open mind on it. I mean, maybe I'm sure certainly the people involved with the dig, they're doing it for the right reasons. But yeah, I do keep that option open, Green Tea and DJ, that there's something more there that's maybe not been. They don't want people to uncover. I don't know. I just think you've found this amazing archaeological site. I just would think, or you could cover part of it but then carry on with others bits, or excavate something new and cover up the old what you've already worked on. I don't know. I would have thought there was something else to do. I mean, there was mention as well, the cost would be prohibitive of putting a covering over. But let's face it, I'm sure it'd be a tiny fraction of the kind of money they spend on all sorts of other things, and I'm sure they could raise the money for it if need be. But non-human remains, maybe, DJ, maybe they did find something. That would be interesting. This is in the it's in the Orkney Museum, but it was found in Nessa Brodgar. And I just found it interesting. I mean, it's very simple. It's a triangular stone, and just with two other triangles marked out in the bottom of it. I mean, they almost look like pyramids, don't they? It's but again, it's simple geometric shapes. And I mean, this wouldn't have been built. I think these would have been in place before the major pyramids. I think the Great Pyramids, etc., more 2,500 BC. This was like 3,000 plus BC. So this was earlier, but I don't know. I mean, from what Andrew Collins was, so not just him, but I think what they were saying is maybe peoples had same connections from this sort of Siberian area of Asia, and then some went to the north of it, I think the Atlas Mountains, and ended up in northern Europe, and then went across to the Orkneys. This is what Andrew Collins was talking about in his talk at the symposium, and then went to the Orkneys, obviously made these amazing sites there. And from part, like these markings that you seeing on these things that were found on Nessa Bodgar and elsewhere in the Orkneys, they became known as the Groudware people. Like I say, sounds like a band from the 80s. But yeah, so called because of the markings they made on the pottery, etc. And these people then moved down through the British Isles and would, come to down here in the southwest of England eventually, and be responsible for Avebury, Stonehenge, and all the other sites around here. So, yeah, again, a little bit of coincidental stuff. Again, that was the second mention of Orkneys at the symposium, a couple of weeks before I was going to the Orkneys. And Andrew was talking in that talk about what has now been publicized in the national press here. I don't know if you guys have seen it. The BBC put it on their website, etc. But there's been this geological study of stone of this makes up the altar stone in the middle of Stonehenge, which was previously thought to be from the same place as a lot of these other inner stones from this place in quarry in Wales. But now this particular altar stone, just this altar stone, has been found to originate from the north of Scotland, possibly from the Orkneys. They said it was Orcadian stone, so that doesn't it also could apply to the very north of Highlands of the mainland Scotland, but includes the Orkneys. So I mean, Andrew Collins, I suppose, well, there are significant stone circles within the mainland of Scotland as well, but he was suggesting that there was that it had been brought all the way from the Orkneys to as being providing some sort of connection all the way down in the south of England there for Stonehenge with sorry, just distracted by interesting comments in the chat. But yeah, I mean it's just another one of the incredible example. I mean they brought this huge stone all the way from north of Scotland, we know, possibly from the Orkneys, so across the water, and then all the way the length of the British Isles. I mean, this guide that I had when I went to my show, and he was talking also about the standing stones and about how they got them just from within the Orkneys to the site of the stone circles there. I think there's a quarry a few miles away, but still it's a few miles, these enormous stones. And they were saying that there were very few trees on the Orkneys, so didn't think it was a case of using logs to roll them the length, but they've come up with a theory that it was seaweed, that they dragged them over seaweed, and that the seaweed made it sort of slippery, so you could drag it more easily. But yeah, good point, DJ. I suppose they could have had a boat all the way down the coast. It still would have been a major undertaking, you know, in that thousands of years ago. A stone that size, and certainly, although I didn't have it really bad, but known from the ferry up to the Orkney Islands, it can get pretty choppy. Just that part of it. So it's an incredible undertaking. But I suppose not only just the logistics of how they did it, but the fact why they did it. I mean, it's very noticeable that it was. There's obviously something particularly spiritual, maybe, that they want to connect with. They were saying it seems significant now, perhaps, that they've got this altar stone from the far north of Scotland, these other stones from Wales, and then there are also stones from England. So it was like a Neolithic connecting of the British Isles, really. But I don't know. There's probably a lot more to come out, really, or certainly a lot of more theories about why. But yeah, I don't know. It just struck me this little piece, so simple, just two marked out triangles on a triangular stone. Don't know why, but that just somehow had an echo to me, and I don't know why. But I thought it was noticeable as well. This is just a picture of that same stone on a board by the dig at Nesabodgar, and again we've got these Hoy mountains with the valley there in the background, and it just, the way it was positioned directly above the triangle, again these two triangles, again, is that representing the two mountain peaks with the valley. It just sort of struck me. Literally, I was standing in front of this picture on this board, and the mountains was I don't know if that was deliberate, but the mountains literally just above them in the image there. And again, it just seemed to be maybe pointing out again the importance of this twin peaks. David Lynch, he knows some things, doesn't he? Twin peaks, twin towers. That just seems to be something that is echoes through the ages, doesn't it? A symbolism. Yeah, you got a duality, and especially we've got the like this a valley in between, again, which celestial bodies may pass through. This idea of a portal. Yeah, there's something that seems to resonate through the ages on that one. This is this is probably where I could do with the help of my good lady. Oh no, I managed to do it. I'll zoom in a bit there. But again, this is at the Orkney Museum, and it's examples of stuff they come out with from the dig. And these markings, again, they're very simple. They're just lines, crosses and diagonal shapes, geometrical shapes, very simple markings. But I mean, this again, I've been talking about seeing the symbol X all the time. I suppose you could say they're X's, but they're just cross lines, really. But and again, I think this is partly where you get the yeah, good point, DJ. Of course, again, the Freemasons use that symbolism again. The two pillars at the entrance of the Temple of Solomon, which the Freemasons use in their symbology as well. So yeah, they obviously know a thing or two. But yeah, very simple markings, very simple lines. But this is probably not going to show up very well. But it also made me think of this is not going to show up, is it? But this is a picture on a book I've got by Forgotten Origins, the Steve Strong and his brother, and this stone that they came into possession of, you know, in ancient Aboriginal Australia. Again, you've got the markings of these lines on the stone, you know, and they've gone into the possible signification of that, but also talked about how familiar stones have been found in other sites around the world. So I think potentially it's, although these just look like random people have just like scratched lines and stuff like that, I think often there's a lot more to it than that. And again, you've got connections where apparently completely disparate groups of people across thousands of years on totally different sides of the earth seem to use very similar symbols. Some of, I suppose, some on some level you could say these are sort of basic sacred geometry type patterns and shapes, and that maybe there's something intrinsic to, well, intrinsic to the universe and therefore intrinsic to human thought that means that these things come out as representations in the very earliest forms of art in symbology, and then out of those they eventually morphed into more or supposedly complex characters, which then ended up becoming writing in some cases. But everything has this basis in this fundamental sort of sacred geometry. Yeah, I mean, DJ, I think there's a lot in that there might be a previous global civilization. Graham Hancock talks about, or a very notable civilization like an Atlantis that got destroyed in the apocalypse, and the remnants of it then splintered out to different parts of the world and passed the same knowledge on, the basics of different kinds of things, to different more primitive peoples at the time, which is, yeah, there, it does seem very it makes a lot of sense in many ways. So I'm quite taken by a lot of his theories, or there might be something in his theories and overlaid with others. Yeah, I mean, it's not nice to know. I think there is a lot in that. There is a sort of a sacred geometry, if you like in a different way. Joseph Campbell talked about a basis in mythology. How again mythologies around the world tend to follow certain story groups and have you know archetypes of the young hero and hero's journey, those sort of things. And again, he's sort of another book that I haven't got around to reading yet. But from what I know, he's saying that again, it's sort of tapping into, I guess, like a Jungian collective unconscious that's shared. So I quite like that as well. But also, in many ways, there's a more pragmatic and practical sense of, just it did originate from one civilization and then was dispersed out to these different people, and that's the reason why so many common threads are shared between all these different societies, different groups and things. That's just a little bit of a further example of a stone, I think, found around the Bodgar area. Again, you've got these lines and shapes marked on there. It's got a small hole in there. That may just have been something over time. But yeah, that looks almost like an Egyptian thing, doesn't it? Almost like it could be going to sort of an eye shape, and you've got the lines coming out from it. I'm sorry about, I don't know, my phone started throwing up these on every single image. I do apologize a bit. Green tea, a phrase he thought, just like some people today wear shoes with a Nike swish, maybe one of the visiting gods wore a symbol or had one on his craft. Yeah, well, could be. And yeah, that does nice tie in with what Liz is reading with the Gods of Eden and stuff. But yeah, DJ as well. Sorry, yeah, Hero of a Thousand Faces is the Joseph Campbell book, which I keep meaning to read. So that'll probably be a future talk. But yeah, certainly something about the mythologies idea and this idea of central stories that are shared across humanity. I find fascinating. But yeah, that could be very true as well. Green tea, that maybe the ancient people were copying something which they'd seen. I think, again, I haven't seen it, but this sent me a Paul Wellis. You might have, I know you watch a lot of his stuff, Green Tea. Was it Fifth Kind, his website? But apparently he was talking on a recent video that a lot of these sacred sites he feels were marking places where they connected with alien races, and they were marking a place of contact. So that's a video I will have to have a watch of more recent times. But yeah, it's a very tiny little museum in Orkney Islands, but a lot of pieces that were uncovered are in bigger museum in Edinburgh. But yeah, still there's these noticeable pieces actually in the Orkney Islands as well, which is good. Colin Wilson Atlantis books. Thanks, DJ. I've read some Colin Wilson, but not those, so I will put it on a very long list. But then it's all fine, because if we run out of books to read, then it'd be a dull world, wouldn't it? So this is just another little video I took on Neolithic. I know you're gonna be bored with this sight of these mountains from Hoy, but this was a later. This is within the Neolithic site, but it's slightly away from the main site there where they're digging, and this was discovered more recently. This other area, And I think we've got a zoom in a moment, but this is sort of facing away towards those mountains which I was just showing. And again, they're not sure what this site was for. But to me, this looked like a temple-like enclosure, or it reminded me of the Göbekli Tepe and all those sort of things. I mean, again, it's like a bit of a building site, but you've got these just broken base. You can see where there were standing stones, or they might have marked the corners of, well, you've got like obviously like either a courtyard or a building there. It looks like it's like a central pit there. But again, you've got like standing stones and these sort of corner there, and it looks to me almost like an altar, or again, like you've got the Göbekli Tepe, you've got the towers facing the portal stone in enclosure D. Zoom is next pick. Thank you, Liz. I think, well, as I say, they're still, well, obviously the digs have finished now, but they were, as this was discovered more recently than the other sites, so it's had less excavation on it. So they're really not sure about what this thing is. But I get the impression that that's one building or one site, if you like, ceremonial site. Whether it was walled, but it just, maybe it's just because this is the way I'm seeing it. When you've just got these exposed parts, I suppose it might have been covered over, but it looked to me, especially as it was facing where that winter solstice sunset will be coming through those mountains on Hoi, and you had these sort of what would have been standing stones, possibly. It looked to me like a sort of temple site, which hardly would be surprising. Let's face it, it's on a sacred area of land right by the stone circles, and with evidence that they, were doing all these rituals there, possibly feasting, that sort of thing. Yeah, it just really struck me that it was directly positioned, and then you've got the stones in the distance there. It's an incredible sight that they've. So that's just a zoom in. I mean, obviously, because they were literally digging there. I mean, I still can't quite believe that they've just. I mean, the archaeologists, some of them have been working on it for like 20 years, and it's just like, oh yeah, it's just the field again now. I don't know. It just seems so weird somehow. But yeah, you can see that obviously was like a, well, either a standing stone or a huge stone that would have been like a corner piece or the edge of a wall. And I think there's another standing stone there, but it looked to me, when you see pictures that we've all seen of ancient and even not so ancient temples, and it just looked to me that was just slightly closer to the lock, and it was angled in a different way, whereas the other, I don't know, it just seemed to be pointing towards those mountains and the gap where the solstice sunset would go. Yeah, that true, green tea. I mean, that's what a psychedelic tripper. Yeah. Well, or even yeah. I mean, Andrew Collins. Sorry to keep mentioning him, but then yeah, he's a good guy, and I think he does a lot of good research. But his friend Deborah Cartwright, who's a psychic, and he's done a lot of these questing things with her, and a lot of things also with the sites in Turkey when they were just under the ground. He like gave her sort of a stone that he brought from Turkey, and she had these sort of psychic visions, and she was like, "You got to get back there. There's more there." She sort of had images that there was so much going on there. But yeah, that sort of thing, DJ and green tea. I think psychics and remote viewers, they can certainly reveal a lot. I mean, obviously, again, oh, well, more than anything else, traditional archaeologists would throw their hands up. But was it, I think Ben was talking a while ago. I remember on one of his videos. But was it that, you know, when they found the remains of an old king was it in Nottingham? Was it what's the king? Was it the one that Shakespeare portrayed as a hunchback? Richard III. But he was found. The remains were found under a car park. It was Richard III. Thanks, DJ. But I think I heard Ben mention this. It was actually a woman had like a vision. I don't know if she was actually a psychic, you know, knew of psychic abilities, or she was someone that had been trying to find the remains of it. But a particular woman had a vision of where the remains would be, and just went to, you know, where this car park was, and they dug there, and that's, they found them, you know. But again, you don't get in the mainstream story. There was I remember there being a lot said at the time when they found these remains. But yeah, this woman had a like a dreamlike vision of where they would be, and then exactly was the right spot. So 100%. Well, yeah, Green Tea says there'll be energies of these places in the past, and that's obviously what certain people can tap into. And I think everyone can to an extent, or, you know, they'll get a feeling of something in a place. And, you know, and I know we talked in about plasma and that sort of thing. I mean, there's scientific basis for what has previously been woo-woo ideas of there being some sort of energies and frequencies. I mean, let's face it, it just stands to reason. I mean, even if you've got no spiritual thought in your head about it, or belief in spirit or magic or anything like that, it's just, if people were living in a place for thousands of years, and this Nessa Brogar site, I think, was in use for, you know, hundreds of years, and you know, there's so much human activity goes on, life, death, you know, births, all sorts of dramas that's going to affect any place, but especially when, you know, I'm sure, I don't know if anyone's marked things like ley lines and stuff, but this area, this strip, which has got this site, Nessa Brodgar, the Ring of Brodgar, standing stones of Stanes, Odin's stone, the cairns, sort of just almost at the base of this land bridge through these two lakes. I mean, such an incredible area of energy, which was obviously already there in the landscape before any people got there, I'm sure. But then people who are in tune to what was there, and again, you know, you've got those mountains there with the valley where the winter solstice sunset almost perfectly aligns with. So people would see that, and they would be in very closely connected, obviously, to the land. They relied on the land to survive. You know, they were more exposed to the elements. They were literally in the throw of the elements, and they obviously had to live on their wits to hunt and then farm. So they would have felt that, you know, this place is just, it's obviously got symbolic importance, and then they needed to mark it with the Green tea's talking about cutting her toenails outside. Yes, we all like to imprint our DNA, whether it's toenail clippings or beard shavings. It's all part of it. It's all part. We've all like to connect our energies to the landscape. That's what it's all about. Whether that will still be there thousands of years' time for people to find is perhaps another matter. So this is what Neil mentioned a while ago. This is my shao, or well, I'm pronouncing that wrongly. Mice how, I think. I think how. I think there's some conjecture as to where the name comes from, but I think it might be an old word for hill. So this is a chamber cairn, and it's probably the most famous one. So again, apparently it's similar to Newgrange in Ireland, and again that winter solstice sunset, I believe it is. It's aligned where it goes through the entranceway to light up the back of the chamber. So again, Liz, have you been weeing in our shrubbery again? So yeah, again, there's an alignment with solstice. So again, you've got that connection, and you can imagine this is will be a a dark chamber where the dead were buried, the remains of the dead were buried, and then at this one time of year, the sunset on the sort of the shortest day, light would come through into the tomb and illuminate it. The beginning of the growth of light to coming out of the winter, the sort of the death of the land, and then the light coming through to symbolize the rebirth. So yeah, a really powerful location. As I was saying before, you can't film inside it, but it's got this amazing amount of Norse graffiti. So it's a bit of a connection. Like I've said before, my main reason for going to the Orkneys was these incredible Neolithic sites, but also I was conscious of the Viking history there as well. So that was another little another thing that drew me to it. So it's not, it's a nice, if you like, this idea of overlaying of different histories and cultures and ages of peoples. So the Vikings came to the Orkneys in the 8th century AD. So obviously thousands of years after these Neolithic sites were built. And then they were apparently raided at some stage. These Vikings sort of broke in through the top of it. Apparently used to have a conical top of it, which is interesting. Again, you got that almost like a conical hat idea on top of the cairn. But it hasn't got that at the moment. Obviously, the roof has been rebuilt. But they broken through the top of it, and there's all this graffiti, and it's the largest collection of rune writing or engraving anywhere outside Scandinavia. But it's quite funny, really, because you sort of like think of that. Oh my God, is this the runes of knowledge? But actually, the majority of these bits of graffiti are literally like graffiti that we would get these days. Basically, the Norse equivalent of Kilroy was here. It's literally stuff like, Thorn Iggotson wrote this. It is literally that in runes. But there is actually it's actually a bit naughtier than that. There's pretty much there's one's thorny bedded Helgi or Helga or thorny fucked and Helga carved. That's apparently on there, these ancient runes, but they don't say it like that in the guidebooks. So yeah, so Vikings were basically getting naughty in the chambered cairn and then writing a graffiti on there to say, oh yeah, I got her in the cairn. So yeah, it rather changed its emphasis, or maybe it was a different so maybe it was a different well, there was different kinds of rituals going on. So in the Vikings, so yeah, basically the Vikings were having it away in the cairn and then writing runic graffiti. But there is some slightly more elaborate rune stuff there. I'm so sorry, I just took that image off the internet. That is one of the rune bits of graffiti, but there is a lot of it. But like I say, I couldn't actually you're not actually allowed to take your own images inside, so they basically show you with a torch the different kinds of graffiti, but some of it is quite massive. It's almost like they've sort of run out of room on one bit as it was writing upwards by the entranceway. But there was another one that said these runes were carved by the man most skilled in runes on the Western Ocean with the axe that killed Gorka Transkill's son in the south of Iceland. And apparently that was he was a famous like legendary Viking, and the person that killed him, this axe became quite a mythological axe, a symbol of power. But again, whether this person actually did have that axe, again, it's bravado. It's whether it's saying I bedded so and so here, or I'm just the best at writing runes with this axe, which I got from this bloke that killed this most famous Viking. Basically, I think I've read that it's sort of quite notable with the Vikings. I mean, I sort of said before, it's almost like, I guess they're not classed as like an empire because they were all these various different kings, different competing groups within Vikings, across what's now, or originated from what is now 3 different countries: Scandinavia, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, modern countries. But it's incredible how far they spread. I've been reading a book from Neil Oliver in his BBC days before he came over to our side via GB News. But his book on the Vikings. But I mean, guys, it's incredible how obviously famously they went across to North America way before Columbus, and but they went all the way down basically to the Middle East. Apparently, in Constantinople, the Roman Emperor had a sort of a bodyguard of these sort of Viking mercenaries at one point, and I didn't realize this because I was in the Hagia Sophia, which has now become a mosque again in Istanbul. And I've seen a photograph of it online. I didn't know any of this at the time when I was there, but there's actually some runes, a runic sort of saying carved into the floor in this Hagia Sophia. I can't remember exactly what it says, but I think again it's just along the lines of so and so was here and I'm bloody cool and strong type stuff, really, in runes. And so that's possibly from one of these Viking bodyguards for the emperor. But yeah, they stretched far and wide, and yeah, I mean they were notable farmers as well, and they built these communities. And over time, there's where they form strong communities, shall we say, with sort of little mini parliaments or legislature. I mean, I read this pamphlet which was a bit thing sites where you got place names nowadays that have got thing or a derivation of the word thing, but that was actually in the Viking term. They had these places where they had like assemblies, prototype sort of little courts or parliaments. And yeah, so they introduced a lot of things, I suppose, and they did have an organisationary skill, and it wasn't all just about raping and pillaging and stuff like that. But I'm not going to have rose-tinted spectacles about it. They did do raping and pillaging, but I guess that was what most peoples did then to each other, and it was going conquering lands and who would be the strongest. But when you think of different derivations of Vikings, descendants of Vikings, William the Conqueror, basically the Normans were Viking descent, or I think they were. William the Conqueror was basically a Viking. So you don't think of the Normans being Vikings, but when they covered most of the British Isles one way or another at one era or another. Dublin was founded by Vikings. Just so far reaching, but let's just go on to the. Oh, sorry, I'll pause there for a moment because I'm okay. We'll go back to the Vikings in a minute. This was another chamber that I went into. Again, it was one I got to go in on my own because it's Cuwen or Cuwen. Now Liz has put up a short with basically the start and finish of this video, because it goes on for several minutes. But I don't know if you noticed there, or if you've seen the short. But I just wondered, friends of ours, Tony and Pete and Gemma, are often taking photographs and they see what could be orbs just appearing in photographs. Now this was in one of these cairns. So this is very similar to my sow in terms of the way it's set up. With you've got like a main central chamber, and then you've got these little side walls. I think I'm actually in the side chamber here, and they got 4 of these side chambers. So I presume each of these would have had the remains of people in there. And again, be a ceremonial site, and various sort of relics and remains have been found in these sites. Now, again, I was sort of talking. I think I was wittering away on the video. I don't even think it was audible very much, but you can hear in the short when I was talking about. So yeah, this is a cairn again, green tea. So I think they built it again to be a chamber where they interred the dead, but probably for other ritual purposes as well. But I talked within it. I was just rambling on like a weirdo, but I was talking about sort of thanking the ancestors because I was in their place. And I mean, there's a few things you see sort of flying about, and that's there. And okay, there were insects. I definitely think some of these things there are definitely insects. But towards the start and then towards the end of this video, there was a couple other things where it's just discs, and I don't know if it could be something else. I'm asking the question, but not. Could it be sort of an orb representation of, or not representation, could it be some other kind of entity? If you look now on the screen, there's a few bits coming up, but then you see those discs of light, and I know, look at that one through the center there. I did see it while I was filming at the time, so I sort of stood there and didn't say anything for a while, and it yeah, another one going across the middle there. It's just like being in a bit of a meteor storm of these lights, and I don't know, I mean, there will be insects there, but there will, my camera obviously had a light on it, but then you can see I'm just by the entrance to the cairn there, so there is sunlight coming through. So if they were just drawn to the light, would they not be around where the entrance is to where the sun's coming in? Maybe, yeah. Green Tea asking, was there a room you had to step over a very short wall to get in the room? Well, yeah, I think in these little entrance ways there was just a tiny, step up, if you like, from the floor of the cairn. Not a big step, but just, yeah, a little, yeah, maybe there was a stone, not a big stone like a doorstep type thing, but slightly elevated from the floor of the cairn. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how people feel about orbs and whether that could be a thing. I know obviously often it's things like reflections of light from the camera or from other light sources on the screen, or insects as well do come on. But again, you can see these little discs of light, and like I said, I did notice it while I was standing in there, and I just sort of stood still for a bit and just kept the camera going. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the construction, I don't know about the stone here, but obviously a lot of stone circles, megalithic sites, they do use quartz and other crystals that we know store energy, harness things. There's a little light in the bottom. What's that? Never noticed that before. Maybe that's just something in the ground. But yeah, I did notice that at the time, but I just thought I'd let things run. And well, true, Green Tea, I think, yeah, obviously there's a stone there, Green Tea, at the entrance. Again, you don't quite know how much has been moved about. Obviously things have been moved about, and that I'm not sure if that wall's been put in there. It's not, obviously some of the cairns people have put a new wall in, but yes, I think a lot, those sort of orbs is what a lot of people think of as fairies. Again, at the start here, if you look on the screen now, I think you get some orb type effects at the start of the video, if I remember rightly, and then it was mainly at the end there. But and if you see Lizard put up a short, oh, there we go, just one coming across the middle of the screen there, put up a little short saying orbs ? Just having the couple of little fragments from the start and end with the most sort of striking bits, which I think raise a question. I think there's other bits maybe during the body of the video, and you think, oh yeah, that's going to be insects just flying about. But yeah, like I say, I mean, that later part of the video, I was quite near the entrance to the cairn. As you can see, these are quite large stones. I mean, not obviously huge, like standing stones, a lot of them, but some of them are quite sizable. And then they built up the walls there, almost like where you get the walls made of dry stone walling, you know, which is again is a practice that people don't quite know how to do anymore. They sort of end up using cement or something in the middle of the stone slabs. But in the past, people just used to make them without anything, any substance holding them together, and they just used to stay standing for centuries. But again, it was great to have this experience, just to be in there for several minutes on my own. I sort of got there was a couple just sort of starting to come out. I just hung around for a bit, and then as soon as they'd gone, I got in there and was able to have time on my own there. And then just as the video stopped, basically I heard voices, and there was a group of about 5 people that had just turned up. So I just made it right, really, just between other people getting there, so I had the place to myself just for a few minutes. So like I say, that's especially, as I say, my Sao is the best known place, but you can only go there as a guided tour these days. I thought I'd missed my opportunity, but then I managed to get a last minute sort of space on a tour. But you can only go in a tour, you can't take photos inside. So it's just good to have this experience of being being somewhere like this on your own. Or was I on my own? Oh, this is that end bit again. Just have a look at the screen, see what you make of it. The little discs of light that are coming around, that one sort of hovering. It's got that sort of ball lightning UFO type way it moves. That particular one that just sort of like Liz said, it seemed to like stop and look at me and then move away. And then this one is like something out of Star Wars when you're going into hyperspace. And that one did a right hand turn, didn't it? But yeah, I did see them through my. I didn't see them outside of the camera lens, if you know what I mean. But I was aware of them through my camera while I was standing there, and I thought I'd just stand there for a while and just keep filming and to see what happened. But there is a huge amount of activity there, and yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I I know what you mean about doing some Orms green tea. I guess a lot of people would have maybe tried to meditate or chant or something like that. But I guess again, that's not quite me. But I don't know. I just put my hand on the stones, and I did say things about, oh, you know, thanking the ancestors and asking for their help. I said about Corney, and we're in the times we're in. We need the strength of the ancestors. But if you look at the short, there was a point when I just said the ancestors, and that's when the sort of the first orb question mark seemed to flash across the screen. In time for the word ancestors, but it's probably a coincidence. But I don't know, intrigued me. But yeah, so I thought it worth showing you guys that. This, going back to the a remnant, maybe. Thanks, Green Tea. I like to think maybe they were telling me that they were there. Yeah, it's definitely made me think. This is a place called Bersay. So this is sort of going to the Viking settlement now. Now this there's a well-known Viking ruins on this little. Well, it's not technically an island, but because it is connected to the mainland, but it's just a sort of like a little land bridge. Well, they've added to it. You can see they've sort of concreted it to make it a pathway that's sort of safe for people. But basically, you can only cross over at low tide. So yeah, low tide on the Wednesday was about 9 in the morning. So I actually managed to get myself out of bed and get on the 7 o'clock bus from Kirkwall, where the hotel was, to there. Um, um, so yeah, you can cross at low tide for a couple of hours to where these Viking ruins are. So I mean, it's a spectacular sight around there. Just in terms of the geography, the geology, it's a spectacular, beautiful sight around the Orkneys. So I mean, it's worth going for the scenery, even if you weren't into anything historical. So this is an amazing location, but I thought it was quite, I don't know if ironic's the right word really, but obviously, I say obviously, the first recorded or the notable historical first occasion when the Vikings raided Britain, or the mainland of Britain anyway, I think was in the 8th century as well. I don't know if it was before they got to the Orkneys, but the Vikings, when they famously attacked the monastery at Lindisfarne in the north of England, north east, and that was this religious community. It was very famous as a seat of learning and had this great library as well. Um, 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 so the Vikings raided, and did their raping and pillaging, and it was written about by sort of Christian scholars as being there was a Christian scholar who used to be at Lindisfarne, and then he went to like be with Charlemagne, this what became a Holy Roman Emperor, sorry, had been sacrilegious that these pagan Vikings had destroyed or sullied this religious Christian site. So then we move on, say the Vikings in Orkney, and they came there in the 8th century AD. Then around, I think, the 10th century AD, was it Thorfinn, this Viking king there? He did a pilgrimage to Rome. He converted to Christianity. I think there already had been previous Viking conversions to Christianity. I think I read they were pretty much the last people maybe in Europe that converted. I guess they were the furthest north. But yeah, again, I suppose in a way, I guess I basically knew, but in a way, it was a bit disappointing. I mean, the Viking ruins or settlements history that you would read about around the Orkneys, they were connected with Christianity. They were Christian sites, and this site here that I'm going to now on BSA. This is called the Broth of BSA. This little extra little island bit on tagged on across this land bridge. But the ruins here again, this Viking settlement, and it's got the ruins of what were a monastery. That's just looking back towards the mainland there. So, like I say, spectacular scenery. But again, it's a Norse settlement, but it's a Christian. It's the remains of a monastery. And I found it quite ironic because the Vikings became known in England, these pagan warriors, heathens, attacking this Lindisfarne, basically, which is a very similar setup here, as I understand it. It's like an island or again, I think it may just be connected by a land bridge or something like that, but it's sort of away from the mainland, and it's obviously a place that's like where, you know, the monks would go, sort of separated a little bit from the rest of the world, the rest of the civilization, to do their praying, do their reading, their learning, etc., etc. And the Vikings raided it, these pagan warriors defiling it, and then a couple of centuries later, they're actually converted to Christianity, and they're building and having a monastery doing a version of the same thing they were doing at Lindisfarne, but this was under the Vikings, you know. Yeah. So, but I mean, you know, it's an interesting settlement. Again, obviously, just the ruins you can see here, obviously all overgrown. You can see where these the little what would have been the rooms where people lived and did all daily lives. As I say, there was also a monastery here as well. I've got some other videos. I think that looks, I'm saying it looks a bit serpentine, but I think it's just where it's overgrown again, maybe whether that was storerooms or something like that. But yeah, I mean, as I think I've mentioned before, I felt slightly drawn to the sort of Viking part of the Orkneys because I read that's where my surname Froud originates from. It was first used as a name, or recorded as being used as a name, with the Viking settlers in the Orkneys, and it was first like a nickname. Like a lot of surnames began as sort of nicknames, first names almost, and then yeah, became into surnames. And it meant a clever person. I'm glad I've piqued your interest, Green Tree. It sounds interesting, that work as well. So Laird Scranton, I'm not aware of him myself. I will have to check it out. He wrote about Dogon and Skara Brae in the Orkneys. I haven't actually included footage of Skara Brae. I'll put it on a video another time, but I did go there. But as you see, there's like a pictorial representation of what the monastery looked like. So it was, yeah, very much with Middle Ages Christian place by that time. You know, the Vikings had, well, I guess you could say evolved, although, you know, they'd gone into the empire. They'd been subsumed into this Christian empire, and Liz has been talking a lot about that in her videos, and obviously the gods of Eden and all these ideas that there were maybe extraterrestrial, these custodians that at different times in history would come down and put people on a certain path, humanity on a certain path, do nasty things to humanity, enslave humanity, and the major religions of the world have all been used as ways of controlling people and getting them to do what the custodians want. Oh, Real Stone has just said in this video a few times. Oh. But so yeah, I think it's, I mean, I suppose, you know, I'm interested in the Norse mythology a little bit. You know, we've looked into things about the Norse mythology. but there was none of that really. It was, to say, ironically, there was things like the what was called the Odin stone, although the main part of that was blown up by a idiot farmer in the 19th century. But that was obviously naming a megalithic stone in a stone circle thousands of years before the Vikings. So, but actual like references to Norse mythology within the Orkney Islands, didn't really see any signs of that. Basically, what was the remains even here of this is like the walled bits, significant bits of the ruins are from this monastery. This was the grandest bit of the site, if you like. It's got the walls that have stood the test of time more, because this is where the monastery was, and that's where that was the most important part of the settlement. So yeah, well, they certainly had a great view. Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible site. It's an incredible, yeah, just love the Orkneys. I do recommend it. Is your name You're so rude, Liz. You're so rude. Oh dear. I've been talking for over 2 hours, and only an hour and a half of those have been ums. Bloody rude, mind, didn't you? Yeah. So this, I mean, it's a significant site, and you can get the impression, I mean, how people lived, you know, right in the midst of the elements. You think in a way you'd want to be a bit more inland, because I know a bit from the day when it was bad weather and it really rough winds and lashing rain, and to be on this little isthmus jutted out into the stormy sea. It must have been, well, it must be frequently incredibly hostile. So I guess in a way a place to concentrate your mind on eternity, or another side to life. So I mean, like I say, I mean, I'm prepared, certainly. I mean, even if I do agree, I think even in old me, thought of these organized religions as being a way of controlling and getting the better of people and manipulating them, a power thing. But within that, I do believe there are, always have been and always will be, people that do have a strong spiritual side, and they find a connection to it within the mythology, for want of a better word, of all these different religions. I think what they've tapped into is part of something that's eternal and beyond any of the religions and mythologies that are given out. But I think people can find a connection to that in various different ways. But that doesn't validate the nasty, terrible things that are done by the organized religions when it just becomes the state religion, the belief system that is imposed by an empire or an authority. But I guess what it comes down to is the essential spirituality is something within all of us. I know this is stating the obvious to most people, but it's just something we can all connect to, that is universal, and that is in everyone. That's microcosm in the macrocosm type of idea. But yeah, within the Orkneys, what's yeah, you're right, Green Tea. Some folks manage to hold on to spirituality despite organized religion trying to stamp it out. Quite right. Oh yeah, DJ, the cult of Kia. Yeah, well, that's all. Praise be to Kia. That's just a little bit more of the same settlement in BSA. So this was, as I say, it's pretty much seemed to be the centre for the Vikings at some point, or what became the religious centre. And they had some leader, Magnus, who he was killed by, he was sort of betrayed by someone and murdered. And he was supposedly a pious leader, good guy. Whether that was true or not, or that just became a mythology around him. But then after he died, there was supposed to have been sort of various miracles that happened. I think there was something like a bishop didn't believe that he was holy or something, and ended up going blind, and that was taken of some sort of sign that he was a saint. Although again, it's not a very nice spiritual thing to do, blind someone, is it really? But anyway, this Magnus he was eventually this Thorfinn, a subsequent leader who had a conversion, went to Rome on a pilgrimage when Rome had long since become the Holy Roman Empire, and this whole bounding up of the dominant force with what had been splinter cults or belief systems. And again, this is Gods of Eden reading out. If you haven't already, check it out. I know some of you will be familiar with the book anyway, but listening to the chapters on Jesus, and of course there's debates on whether he existed or not, who he was. I think the thing is, Thorfinn's home. So Thorfinn's as I say, that Viking leader in the Orkneys who did convert and seemed to be quite, obviously it's these things, if the leader converts, then basically everyone else in the country has to convert. And that's just a picture of an item with rooms that was found in that settlement. It mentions a saga. There's an Orkney saga. You've got all these Norse sagas, although again all of them were written like 100 years or more after the events that they supposed to depict. But you've got obviously various Norse sagas talking about Vikings and their battles and and then of course the Norse mythology. But there's an Orkney saga. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but that is all about the Norse in the Orkneys. I've got distracted again, and I've forgotten what I was banging on about. Oh yeah, Jesus. So I think the Jesus of the literal Bible, that is the Bible that's given us the established narrative, shall we say, now, probably didn't exist him in that form. But I'm prepared to believe that there may have been a Jesus that or maybe had a different name, but things I hear that was talked about in Gods of Eden, and I think I read elsewhere that I think in Bellino, he was talking about him, that he was actually basically a revolutionary leader that was just trying to get rid of the Romans that were occupying, where he lived. But then in Gods of Eden, it was talking about him being a spiritual person connected with these sort of secret societies, but going with this idea that he went to India and was it Isha that's written about in this Hindi temple, and that he basically got spiritual teachings in India, but he was he decided to follow this maverick Hinduism, where they wanted to, a belief in individual spirituality rather than following these tenets of this custodian religion. Issa, thank you, Liz. So I quite that. Jesus was, Liz was talking about, when she used to be a Christian, she's got these tattoos of Jesus, and oh no, I'm just, now following the custodians, the people that are basically enslaving us. But I think if you consider him as a maverick revolutionary, then I think he could be a cool symbol. Maybe we should reclaim him in a way. Because let's face it, a maverick revolutionary spiritual person is what we all need to be about, isn't it? I like that quote, Green Tea. My favorite quote from Jesus comes from a Gnostic gospel. He says, "Look again." Well, I think the Gnostics is certainly an interesting sect in terms of those sort of ideas of maybe a more personal spirituality. So this is, as I say, there was this Magnus who was a Norse leader, and then he got killed, murdered, which is basically some sort of political dispute by the sounds of it. But he became revered, and then this later leader, this Thorfinn, had this conversion, went to Rome. So there was trade with the Vikings and the Romans for a long time previously, but I guess often these things are politically motivated, where rulers decide to convert to a religion, because then that means basically they've got an alliance with another power, there's political reasons for these things as well. So obviously I guess this Thorfinn was aligning with the Roman Empire, maybe to increase his power, who knows. Oh, how cynical. But anyway, following this, I guess maybe you could say cynically, to give them more authority, if you like, and give people someone to revere, a Viking that was also a Christian saint. So this Magnus was declared a saint, so became a saint. And this cathedral, which is an impressive cathedral, and built around 900 years ago, and it is very striking inside. It's built with this red sandstone, so it does look sort of medieval. It doesn't look like any cathedral that I can really remember. This red sandstone, the style of the bricks, it does feel, obviously it's old. I mean, a lot of cathedrals are old, but this different style makes it feel like it's built a little bit on the outer edges of things somehow. I don't know, I'm not really explaining myself very well, but it did give a feeling of being sort of medieval, and something slightly apart, I suppose, maybe from the cathedrals of England, perhaps, and Italy, and all these other places where you see these Christian churches and grand buildings. But yeah, 900 years ago. So I mean, it's a very impressive building, built that length of time ago. I'm not sure, DJ, where the red sandstone came from. I've got a feeling it wasn't that far away. It was, fairly locally sourced, I believe, but I'll have to look that up. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer 100%. But yeah, and that's just the front of it. So I mean, a very grand building, but yeah, I guess this guy. So again, it's sort of, and this St. Magnus is apparently, he's quite a notable saint now. I think there's this cathedral was, or some annex to it was modelled on the big cathedral in Trondheim, which I saw from the ferry when we went to Norway, but didn't actually get off the boat because we didn't have time to stop, so didn't actually see it. But famous cathedral in Norway. So again, this, you know, when the Vikings became Christians, basically. But St Magnus is still revered as a saint by Christians of formerly Viking people. I think I read the Faroe Islands have got you know, revere him, and he's, you know, he's a patron saint, that kind of thing. Yeah, it is a very impressive cathedral, 100%. Incredible building. I mean, I can always sort of divorce myself slightly. I know that there's, well, you know, obviously we live in Bath, and that's got some amazing old buildings. You know, the Abbey, great architecture. You know, and Liz will say, you know, same as we went to Oxford, you know, incredible buildings, architecture, but they're basically the symbols of empire, Illuminati, whatever you want to call it. And I know they are, but I can also appreciate the beauty of the buildings. And I suppose, again, you know, talking about sacred geometry earlier, they've obviously got, you know, the Freemasonry type connections. They knew the power of, you know, obviously, again, these buildings were often on ley lines, or, you know, they built on the sites of ancient megalithic sites, perhaps, or those sort of things. And again, obviously, Bath, we've got the thermal waters, which have been, you know, again, since pagan times, have been a holy site. So they build on these sites. Yeah. Yeah, I reckon Florence is an amazing place, DJ. I agree with that. But yes, Liz, yeah, exactly. Like you say, reminds in Norway that, as I say, they did. There is apparently parts of it where they did even model it on cathedral in Trondheim in Norway. So all these Scandinavian Viking connections, I mean, there's still things within the cathedral, sort of mentions of the Vikings, but basically it's a Christian, it's a cathedral. So I can divorce myself. I can appreciate the incredible buildings for what they are aesthetically, and even, for want of a better word, spiritually. Because although I'm not Christian, but I can still appreciate to some extent that these are places which can be elevating your soul in a way. But I do know as well that, again, going on the idea of organized religions being a controlling force, that ultimately maybe they're seeking to channel and control that spirituality from the masses, and direct it, you know, within a hierarchy where they're at the top telling people what to do. But yeah, it was still a very impressive place. So it was worth seeing. I believe, folks, that's come to the end of it. Maybe we should just call this talk Mark's saga of the Orkneys. But yeah, appreciate you all listening. I'm probably going to sort of wind it up now, because I've run out of things to say. But hello, Margaret. Have you just arrived? Have you just arrived, Margaret? I'm sort of winding up, Margaret, but you can listen back to me. Thanks, Mab. I do recommend the Orkneys if anyone hasn't been. It's an awesome place. Like I say, I know Neil used to live there, Neil Peel. Check out the Paranormal Peep Show. Obviously, we were on it. Ben's been on it, and Ben's doing his talk of Helen Duncan do check that out because that's a very fascinating insight. What was my biggest takeaway of the trip? Green tea. Wow. Difficult to sort of sum it up in one thing. I think just that the concentration of those sites in that narrow strip of land, just obviously we're in an area around here where there's a lot of sites within a pretty small area, not far away from each other, Avebury, Stonehenge, and on to Glastonbury. It's pretty geographically close, but these such a tight concentration of incredible sites. The cairns, the stone circles, those settlement sites, Nessa Brogar, just that concentration of slightly varied but interconnected sites just blew me away. But yeah, on a sort of, I suppose you could call it on a negative, more negative, just this thing that where I was interested in looking at the Viking heritage in the Orkneys, but basically it was all about Christianity and the legacy of the Vikings in Orkneys was all connected to Christianity. So, but I think it's partly, the Vikings as a whole, from what I've been reading about them, they weren't big on. I guess they weren't. There are there are big. There are sites of historical connection of obviously with the Vikings that remain, but maybe not compared to some of the other cultures. They didn't have certainly not not compared to the megalithic cultures of building these really incredible, lasting, and seemingly powerfully connected to the world sites. And like I say, it's funny as well, even with their writing. I mean, the runes. I mean, there's so much in runes which I've only just barely started looking at. I've got some runes that I got in Glastonbury, and I have read a bit of, the idea of the runes as divination, or and that does fascinate me, and it's something that I want to go into more. And I like that idea of the idea that within the characters that are a language, and just like our own written language is literally can just convey everyday things, but then they also, these symbols in each in their own right, carries so much power and can actually connect with this universal force. And actually I do believe, like things like the I Ching, it can connect with something, and maybe whether predict the future, or it can just indicate trends in time, that sort of thing. But it's funny, so many of that they're saying the Orkney, sorry, the rune writings that remain, that are marked in stones. And as I say, going to this graffiti in the cairn, the Mysal cairn in the Orkney, and it literally is, these runes, and you think, look at it, and it's all these symbols. My God, what does it mean? And it means, oh, Torsen bedded Helga here. Oh, right, okay. Oh, blimey. It's not like, but there was one longer piece, and it was something. It was like, oh, you came here to search for treasure, but I came here sometime before and took it all. So it's that's quite a funny thing, because it's sort of like people thinking, was there treasure? Did someone take it? But you get the impression that they were just, again, joshing, and it was like it was irreverent and jokey. And so it wasn't like they were trying to it wasn't like they were trying to say great things, great poetry or psychological insights. So yeah, maybe they just get the impression the Vikings were just straightforward people. They were about surviving first, and then they were about expanding an empire and increasing their hold on land. But then it was again concentrated in a few leaders, I suppose, like so many empires. Well, yeah, this smudged me, and I did bring a stone back, but we need the ancestors with us, so I'm going to connect it and take it to some sites here, because that's what the ancients did. They brought stone from the Orkneys down to Stonehenge, so they wanted that connection. So I think we need that connection again. I don't know what's going on in chat. Oh dear, the I Ching, the itching, I don't know. Oh dear. Right. I might have to. You're obviously having a great time chatting in that. I don't really want to, but I'm out on my feet here. So I've been rambling on like a complete idiot for nearly 3 hours, and you poor things have been listening to me. Right. I'm going to have to love you and leave you, but I do appreciate you listening to me ramble on for a long time. I'll try and get some more footage up, maybe in a little video, so you can have a look at things at your leisure. But you do have a look again at that short about the orbs, and let us know in comments on that one video or this one what you think about it. If you think it could be spirits or entities, or is it just insects or light? Thanks, DJ. I appreciate everyone listening, and I love you all. And have a great rest of your weekend. And we shall speak again soon. Bye all.